A unique fantasy world with incredibly beautiful nature exists between the world of humans and the world of spirits and is also inhabited by a variety of creatures. Want to explore this world and plunge into adventure? Stay until the end of this video and support the author with a like. A local elder, a beautiful elven girl, told about spiritual trees that have limitations for growth, so sometimes they need to be cut down. Isen thanked the elder for her trust and promised to carefully cut down the huge tree. The elder, of course, knew she could count on this responsible man and thanked him for his help. Isen turned to the mighty winds from the other world and with a special spell wanted to borrow a powerful force. The magic power with the might of the winds instantly turned into a deadly blade. Isen sliced through the thick tree trunk with a lightning-fast hand movement. For the students, it was an incredible sight that they were thrilled by. The children really loved their teacher and admired his abilities. Isen waited for the huge tree to fall and promised the students that sooner or later they would be able to do the same and gain real power, because they were all children of spirits. But before learning a strong spell, one must clearly understand what effect it has, because one must not waste one's strength completely. The children agreed with Isen and really followed all his advice and instructions. The elder thanked the boy for his care for the children, but Isen replied that it could be taken as compensation for being allowed to stay here. Therefore, it was no problem for him to assist anytime he was called. Isen Otisu said goodbye to the elder and the children and went home. The guy had been living in this picturesque world for 20 years now and considered this place as his home. Approaching the house, Isen noticed Rin, who was carefully sweeping the area, and announced his return. Rin distracted herself from her occupation and greeted the teacher. The girl was a descendant of a long-lived race and had a unique appearance that only complemented her fine character. Rin reported another letter, of which there had been more and more recently. Rin was living with Isen as an apprentice and was helping with household chores as well as filing important documents. Isen took the letter in his hands and decided to talk to the girl about an important decision. The teacher informed about his desire to go on a distant journey. Rin almost dropped her broom from surprise and instantly became sad. The girl tried to find out what events had made the teacher pack up so quickly and decide to go on a long journey. Isen recalled that it had been 20 years since the demon blade had been damaged, and it was then that he had been summoned to this world to provide assistance. But now this world was feeling much better and the letters could be seen for that. Isen invited the girl into the room and Rin was shocked by the sheer amount of letters, of which she had only seen a fraction. Isen explained that they were all letters from old students and it really wasn't easy for him to read so many, because since he had been summoned, each of the students had sent a letter every month. Rin remembered how she had once helped to read some of these letters and they always told of good news. The curious girl asked if she could read some of the letters again, because she was very curious to know how people in other territories lived. In the process of reading the letters, Rin found out that most of the teacher's old students had grown up and found jobs and they were still as famous as the 100 heroes. Many of the students had become sages, rulers, and commanders-in-chief, and some turned out to be directors of the best magical academies and rulers of huge empires. All these grown-up and successful people still continue to treat teacher Isen as a father and like little children tell about their achievements and wait for praise from him. Former students tell about lands, inhabitants, or useful discoveries that they were able to create and study on their own. Each student describes in detail the route to his home and constantly invites Isen to come and visit. The teacher explained that his students want to show him the beauty of the world, and that is why he wants to go to the open world of people and see everything with his own eyes. But the problem is that all the students live in a variety of places, and if they find out that their teacher has traveled to the human world, then they might disturb a huge number of innocent people and embarrass them. And that was why it was best to travel independently, exploring new places, and if he managed to meet his students, it would be a good surprise and wouldn't bother random people. Rin appreciated the teacher's ingenious decision to keep his journey a secret, for that way he would be able to travel safely and not worry people. It was obvious to Rin the teacher's desire to return to the human world, for it had indeed been a long time since he had been there. Isen confirmed his wish and recalled his great experience of recovering from 20 years of slumber. Isen used his magical powers and turned to the letters, asking them to hear his call. Rin watched in fascination as thousands of letters flew around the room under the influence of magic. Isen asked to be guided along the best path on the coming journey. Rin was happy to witness the application of the prophet's magic, and the teacher with his understanding of magic words can control everything in this world. The whirlpool of letters continued to swirl chaotically around the room, and Isen, realizing the whole process, ordered a suitable letter to appear before him. Thanks to the magic power, one of the thousands of letters broke out of the total number and quickly appeared in front of the Lord of Magic. Aizen determined the future route and announced the beginning of his great journey. Then the teacher explained to Rina that now she could do what she wanted and choose her own path. And the girl of course wanted to go with her teacher. Aizen agreed to take Rin with him and was glad to travel not alone. But the girl had to wait, because young beauties tend to make themselves wait while they pack. Rin paid attention to the old equipment of the teacher, which he had not worn for a long time, and it was just dusting in the closet. At the same time, the girl had also prepared the trip quite well and packed all the essentials into her hiking backpack. Aizen asked the girl if she really wanted to go with him, because he himself had always said that students should not accompany him. But Rin explained her desire to keep her teacher company by showing concern for him. She reminded him that Aizen had given her permission to do whatever she wanted and she had chosen to travel with him. Aizen thanked the girl for taking care of him and admitted that it would be much easier and more fun for him to travel with her. Rin confessed how she had been preparing for this day for a long time and believed that one day they would see distant lands together. Aizen explained that first he would summon a gate of light and by passing through it they would find themselves in another world. The magical gate of light was an impressive sight and the travelers looked forward to the moment when it would open. Rin gazed in admiration at the glittering patterns of the huge gate, which Aizen had last passed through 20 years ago. Aizen himself was incredibly excited for this moment he had been waiting for. But suddenly, a strange female silhouette, which the teacher had not expected to see, came towards him. As it turned out, it was a spiritual elder, who of course knew about everything going on in this world and decided to ask Aizen in farewell whether Aizen really decided to leave this haven of spirits. Such a question embarrassed Aizen and he thought about his answer. But this teacher's confusion only made the spirit elder laugh. Rin thanked the elder spirit for the care he had shown her throughout her life, and Aizen spoke of how his past students had tried to contact him many times before, and so it was time for him to leave and perhaps meet them on his long journey. Aizen thanked the elder spirit for her generosity and kindness, for she had allowed him to stay in this world for such a long time, and he was glad to find knowledge and peace by her side. The elder admitted that it all brought back memories of when Aizen had first arrived in this world. But despite the past 20 years, Aizen has not changed at all and remains the same young, helpful and friendly person. Perhaps it all had to do with the way time flowed in this world, for it had slowed down aging considerably and Aizen really did feel exactly the same as he had 20 years ago. The teacher thanked for everything the Supreme Elder had done for him and promised to always remember it. The Spirit Elder explained that there was really no need to thank her, as she too had been responsible for those distant events with the demonic blade and had never forgotten about it. She was also grateful for Aizen's care for her children and the love of the young students, the highest achievement of a young teacher. All the students came to say goodbye to Aizen, who loved their kindest teacher in the world and of course were a little saddened by the moment of parting. From such an exciting moment, Aizen could not hold back his emotions and hurried to hug the small and noisy children. In farewell, the Elder of Spirits advised to always turn to her for help if Aizen felt the need. And all these little spirits would definitely become much stronger by the next meeting and would be able to surprise their teacher. Aizen promised to be sure to contact the elder spirits when the time came, for he did not want to cut off all ties with this wonderful world and its inhabitants. After a few minutes, the most exciting moment came, when he had to cross the line into the other world. Aizen, trying to memorize the face of each of his students, promised that they would see each other again, but that they would have to be patient. Gradually, the huge glowing gates opened their arms to the travelers and Aizen, reminding Rina that they should keep their return a secret, offered to go around the world. Meanwhile, in the heart of the city of Niga, an important magical ritual dedicated to the Prophet was taking place. Ancient legends said that once upon a time there was a man called the Prophet who possessed the power to defeat the demonic blade of a trusted servant of the Dark God. Many novices gathered around the shining crystal, and Chief Master Duke Dario spoke of how after many years they had finally achieved results. The novices were genuinely happy with the results and fully believed Duke's words. After finishing the ritual, the High Master advised everyone to rest and left the room. Following the long corridor, Duke decided that the monthly expenditure of materials on the ritual had finally paid for itself. But still, even with aids and auxiliaries, he was far from mastery. But now Duke was fully assured of the return of the man he most wanted to see, and all he had to do was wait for the exciting moment. Luke Dario was one of Aizen's disciples and the current ruler of this magnificent kingdom. Wanting to achieve his main goal as soon as possible, Duke ordered the soldiers to find the man who calls himself a prophet. In reality, Duke only hoped, but was not completely sure that the teacher would return, although everything pointed to the appearance of a very powerful prophet in this world. Very many years ago, Duke had been instructed by Aizen and still believed that all of his accomplishments were available because of the teacher. Duke sincerely wished and made every effort to find his teacher and then give thanks for the knowledge and strength he had received. Among all of Aizen's students, one could safely call Duke Dario the most devoted and loving, for he never gave up hope of meeting him for many years. Traveling through the magical gates of light took only a few seconds, and Aizen and his companion Rin breathed the fresh air of another world for the first time in many years. The weather was very nice indeed. The sun was shining brightly and there was a fresh scent of wildflowers. Aizen looked around a bit and decided that they were near a pioneer city. Rin agreed with her teacher and remembered hearing stories about this ancient city being here for a very long time. But most likely there had been some changes in the past 20 years after all. Aizen praised his student for her excellent memory, for she had indeed memorized a lot of information from the letters she had read and now they knew something about this world. Rin replied that there was nothing strange about it, because her race had a great memory and she could really memorize complicated things from the first time. The girl proudly declared that she remembered all the letters she had read and could retell each of them. So if the teacher needed to clarify something, she was ready to help him. Aizen was surprised to see the scenery ahead, for he really didn't know that all these beautiful forests had already recovered and hidden the wounds of the past tragic events. As he continued to enjoy the nature of this world, Aizen suggested the girl to go to the nearest town and find out how people live now. The teacher wanted to visit a few places and refresh his impressions and knowledge on the local society. Rin was not against such a suggestion, but then she was a little surprised. The girl looked carefully at the teacher's staff and asked why that book inside the tip started to glow unexpectedly. Aizen advised the girl not to worry and explained that most likely this staff had sensed some of his sealed power, and that was why the book had started to glow. This made Rin even more surprised, as this was the first time she had heard of some sort of sealed power. Aizen turned around on the spot a few times and watched the staff react. Then the teacher explained that if the book inside reacted with a bright light, it meant they were moving in the right direction. On the way to the right place, Aizen told the girl about how 20 years ago he had fought against a demonic sword and was eventually able to defeat it. Though as a result of that horrible battle, Aizen himself was on the brink of life and death and lost the ability to control his powers, and so he had to go to extreme measures. As a result, Aizen was forced to seal most of his magical power in various places, and this huge tree is one of those places. Rin was surprised to see a very strange tree, and was eager to see how things would develop. Aizen got as close as possible to the mysterious tree, and a glowing magical ball appeared in the air. Rin began to worry, for he didn't know how dangerous it could be. But Aizen asked the girl not to worry and explained that there was nothing scary about it. After a few seconds, a glowing page appeared in the air with a confirmation request written on it to unseal the seal. After Aizen confirmed his desire to regain his power, the glowing page instantly moved to the open book and took its former place. Rin cautiously asked if the teacher felt the return of his power. Aizen confirmed the completion of the process of regaining some of his former power, and suggested that the girl read the last page that had been added to this magical book. On the last page was an entry about adding a power enhancement skill that wasn't there before, and now Aizen could use the new abilities. Aizen himself felt a significant boost that he hadn't felt in years and thought about the possibility of testing his powers. Rin was happy to hear that her favorite teacher was now even stronger than before, because he was already the standard of magical power for her. Aizen laughed in response and explained that the power enhancement skill actually only improved a part of his abilities, rather than completely granting him extra strength. Rin eventually decided that the whole trip had been planned for the sake of regaining magical powers, but Aizen called it just a trivial coincidence, because he hadn't expected to be in this place after crossing the Gate of Light. Aizen said that his main goal was to visit all his former students, but he felt as if he needed to regain his former powers, which could be useful on this trip. That being said, the teacher admitted that he was really feeling great about his newly acquired strength, and now felt even younger. Rin, thanks to her improved hearing, heard something suspicious and asked the teacher to be careful. But Aizen said that he had already noticed the enemies long ago and prepared to fight them, so there was no need to worry. A few seconds later, bad-smelling low trolls appeared from the thickets of the forest. Aizen didn't expect to encounter these beasts in the center of the forest at all. After all, they should usually dwell near cities. Rin immediately appreciated the monster's appearance and sensed their bloodthirstiness. Rin instantly activated her magic powers and asked her teacher if she should take care of the vile trolls. But Aizen decided to handle the monsters on his own, as it was a great chance to test his new powers. The monsters didn't waste any time and immediately rushed towards their victim. The enraged Shaggy monsters were rapidly approaching, and Aizen decided to send the monsters straight to hell. With his magic staff in front of him, the teacher activated a spell with a flaming spear, and in a few seconds the magic power pierced the dirty bodies of the trolls and the air smelled of burning wool. The monsters didn't expect to face such a strong opponent, but that was the last thing they could think about before the flames engulfed their huge bodies. Instantly, the three huge trolls turned into a bright torch of fire. Rin was once again convinced of the incredible magical power of her favorite teacher and felt safe. Watching the monsters burning, Aizen decided that this flame was much stronger than the one he used in the other world, and the flaming spear spell greatly increased its effect. As a result, the fire magic completely destroyed the enemies and turned the huge trolls into pitiful smoking remains. But after a few seconds, a strange glow appeared from the dead bodies. Aizen was pleased with the magic stone he had found, for such a resource could be found after killing monsters. Aizen explained to his student that in this world, they could collect magic stones from dead monsters, as these stones were very useful due to their versatility. In the end, these magic stones could either be sold or exchanged for things, but either way, a person wouldn't be left in trouble and without money if they had such stones. Then, after getting rid of all the problems and collecting his first trophy after returning to his homeworld, Aizen offered his beautiful companion to continue their travels to the nearest town. Soon after the travelers got out of the forest, they found themselves on the road leading to the city. Aizen enjoyed traveling along the perfectly paved road. He also liked the local river, which originated high up in the mountains and made the area more livable. Aizen admitted that the whole peaceful environment made him enjoy and relaxed. Rin agreed with her teacher, for she too was comfortable traveling through this world. After traveling a considerable distance towards the city, the travelers suddenly noticed a girl who was diligently searching for something in the tall grass. The stranger was upset, and judging by her words, she had lost some important key from the warehouse, and now people would not be able to open it and would be in danger. The girl then noticed strangers on the road and decided to make a request to them. Apologizing for the disturbance, the excited girl asked if they had found the multicolored key on their way, which she had lost carelessly. The girl began to give details about the appearance of the lost key, hoping to hear useful information from the stranger. But Aizen explained that unfortunately they hadn't found anything and had just recently found themselves in this place. The girl became even more upset and began to cry, and then said doubtfully that she had almost no time left. The stranger still decided to find the lost key at any cost, because it had to be here somewhere. Aizen felt the girl's problem and decided to take part in the search. The teacher turned to the girl and said that if she didn't mind, he and his companion could lend her a hand and help her find the lost key. The stranger was glad to have voluntary helpers, but was still embarrassed, for she was ashamed to ask for help from people who were going about their own business. But Aizen was sure that the search would not take long. Especially, he thought that it was the girl herself who would find her lost key. The girl who lost her key told how she was just gathering herbs in the field, but then a kobold suddenly appeared and she decided to chase it away. Her chain broke just as she was doing so, and when the girl noticed, she couldn't find the place where she had lost her key. Aizen listened to the girl and asked her to wait a few seconds and maybe he could solve the problem. The spiritual teacher touched the paving stones and asked the earth for help. Aizen, with the help of magic power, asked to point out to him the place where the key lost by the girl lies and began to feel the power of the earth. The surprised girl looked at Aizen and did not understand everything that was happening, and then asked if he was alright. Aizen got the necessary information while communicating with the earth, and exactly pointed out the place where the girl found her key missing. The girl was surprised and cautiously asked if Aizen could find her key. But the spiritual teacher asked her not to hurry and explained that for now he could only approximately recognize the right place. But then Aizen, thanks to the information he had received, could see how everything happened and realized where to look for the key. Aizen pointed out to the girl an old half-rotten log near the bushes and offered to examine the place next to it. The girl decided not to find out the details and went to look for it. After a few minutes, the girl did indeed find the lost key and was incredibly happy. The girl thanked Aizen for his help, but the spiritual teacher replied that he had done absolutely nothing, as she was able to find her key herself. But the girl disagreed and said about the incredible magic that Aizen used, because thanks to it he was able to see the events of the past. Aizen tried to explain that it was not a unique magic at all and such things could be done by any magic. But at the same time, the spiritual teacher did not give details about his skill of detecting lost things, which is useful in such cases. The earth spirits remembered everything and told about how the girl had chased the kobold away, and how she had caught her chain on a protruding branch and lost the key. The girl assumed that in that case Aizen was probably some famous fortune teller, but Aizen explained his skills only by his ability to listen to the voices of nature spirits, and there was no art of divination in it. But judging by the girl's reaction, Aizen realized that this was probably the first time she had heard of such magic, because even before he left this world many years ago there were very few people who could use such magic. But the girl eventually called Aizen one of the spirit summoners and promised to thank him for his help, and then asked about the names of Aizen and Rin. The spiritual teacher decided not to ask about the spirit summoner, but simply introduced himself and gave the name of his beautiful companion. The girl promised to remember their names and thank them for their help in the future, and then asked if they would live in the city they were going to or if they would only stay there for a short time. Aizen answered without telling the true purpose that they would stay in the city for a while, and then continue their journey. The girl invited her to visit the Alchemist Guild's garden if they had free time, and then she could repay their kindness. At parting, the girl expressed her hope for a speedy meeting and thanked her new acquaintances once again. Aizen called the stranger too active and noisy girl, who was in such a hurry that she even forgot to introduce herself. Rin attributed this behavior to the joy of finding the key, and praised her teacher for such a show of kindness. As they continued along the perfectly paved road, Aizen was in high spirits and excited about the new journey he had been dreaming of for so long. Rin was as excited as the teacher and offered to meet all the obstacles on his way with a smile on her face. Soon the travelers reached the city of Sagittale and immediately noticed that there were no obstacles in this city as they entered the interior unhindered. Aizen was also pleased to see that the location of the building he was heading to had not changed. The building of the Global Guild's branch was much larger than before, and apparently there had been extensive construction work. The Global Guild is an association that collects information about professionals from all over the world. Each person who considers himself a professional in any business registering in the guild receives a special global card, which will be used as an identity card. Rin reported that the Guildmaster General had also talked about this in her letter. As it turned out, she had consulted with her teacher to choose her profession. And once the guild's facilities in the old city area were improved, the problems with transportation were eliminated and security reached a high level. All of this was made possible by the knowledge she received from Aizen. The spiritual teacher remembered how he had actually given advice on this matter a long time ago, and now he was pleased to see the results with his own eyes, which were indeed impressive. The inner room of the Global Guild was indeed very vast, and there were a variety of characters sitting at the many tables. The admin girl greeted the new visitors and offered her assistance. Aizen immediately stated his desire to register and get a guild card. The girl promised to help with the design of the global map and asked what it would be used for. Aizen answered absolutely honestly and told about his desire to travel around the world. This made the admin girl surprised and explained to the stranger that in that case he should fulfill the role of an adventurer. Aizen asked why the girl was so surprised by his decision. The administrator admitted that this was the first time she had heard of such a desire to travel in all the time she had been working, as few people became adventurers in peacetime and more often than not people joined teams. Aizen remembered how after registering a card people get a compendium of professions choosing one of them, and beyond that the person becomes eligible to work. Although in the past only 30% of people who became adventurers actually traveled accepting various requests. The administrator continued to radiate politeness and joy, calling Aizen and Rin very brave travelers, and that was what was welcomed in the guild. The girl then apologized for diverting the topic and offered to fill out a special questionnaire where they had to give their name and job. Rin was very surprised at the huge number of words in the questionnaire and couldn't believe that it was all a list of professions. But Aizen advised not to worry because it was the first time for the girl, and it was only necessary to read the text carefully. Aizen explained to his companion that they should have told her about it in the temple, and that's why in the text you only need to circle the chosen profession, though one could even choose more than one profession if one so desired. Aizen was certain that he was a prophet and a scholar and could learn about 5 more different professions. Although his previous guild card had been destroyed during the war with the evil god, and it was very convenient that one could design such a card an infinite number of times. The admin girl noticed how Aizen had already read the entire text several times but still hadn't made his choice and asked what the problem was. The guy explained that he just couldn't find the profession of a prophet. The girl was very surprised at such a strange choice of profession and asked uncertainly if Aizen really wished to choose this particular profession. Aizen did not understand why it caused such a strange reaction of the girl, but in the end the administrator explained that the last prophet died 15 years ago and as a result there were no living representatives of this profession left. This time Aisen was surprised because he didn't even expect that the profession of a prophet was so rare in the human world. The admin girl immediately informed him that if Aisen chose the profession of a prophet, he would be haunted by the dead and a reaper would be summoned. However, now there was something more serious. Aisen didn't understand at all what it was about and asked to be told in more detail. The admin girl decided that if Aisen called himself a prophet so simply, then perhaps he was unaware of the king's decree over the years. His Majesty Duke had ordered that if a prophet was discovered, he was to report it immediately. And before reporting, all guards in the city and all guild members in the neighborhood were to be summoned to accompany the found prophet. This was something Aisen certainly didn't expect to hear and was surprised at how much past disciple Duke Dario wanted to see him. The administrator stated that if Aisen did call himself a prophet, the event would be reported immediately, and he would be protected as it was considered a big deal. Therefore, she is compelled to ascertain Aisen's desire to become a prophet. After all, there was a serious case in the past where someone confidently called himself a prophet, and then was unexpectedly captured. Aisen of course realized that he was not a false prophet, but he did not want to become popular and attract unnecessary attention. In the end, the guy said that it was just a joke and he was ready to register for any other profession. And then Aisen thanked the admin girl for such an informative story. The admin girl kept laughing, called this joke too strange for a person who is going to be a brave traveler. But of course Aisen couldn't tell the whole truth, because the king here was really overdoing it in his desire to find a prophet, even if it was his former disciple. Therefore, one could not be allowed to get into trouble for unwanted popularity. It was obvious that a profession that didn't stand out too much would fit perfectly with an inconspicuous traveler. So in the end, the spiritual teacher chose the profession of spiritualist and circled the right title. The admin girl was pleased with the completed form and promised to issue a global map in a few minutes. The admin girl took the magical seal with the usual movement and put a special mark in the filled form and in the special card. That was all she had to do as a global guild registrar, and the girl smiling broadly gave the completed card and congratulated her on this event. Aisen was very happy to be registered as an adventurous spiritualist and was ready to go on a further journey. But as it turned out, all the procedures in the guild were not over and the registrar girl politely offered to come to the table at the end of the counter. Aisen didn't expect to do anything else in the guild and looked at the strange wooden board with some round elements. The spiritual teacher asked what the purpose of this strange board was. The admin girl explained that it was a special board for researching the magic power of each guild member. The administrator immediately realized that if Aisen didn't know about this procedure, it meant that he had made a guild card for the first time and would now evaluate his magical abilities for the first time. Aisen of course did not talk about his past experience as a member of the Global Guild, and he was curious to know about the results of the guild reform during his absence after the war. The administrator explained that every new member of the guild had to measure their magic power, after which they would be categorized into a rank category. By refining the individual ability values, the guild would be able to choose the right job for each member and reduce accidents during dangerous missions. Aisen recalled how one of his students had reported his invention for measuring magical power, which ended up being used in the Global Guild. It was now clear that this invention was this strange wooden board. The admin girl confirmed the spiritual teacher's assumption and reported that this board was specially designed by a guild advisor who was one of the hundreds of heroes, and she herself would like to fully thank all the heroes and their teacher for all the achievements in this world. Aisen felt proud that one of his students had become a famous inventor, and then asked what exactly he needed to do in order to measure his magical abilities. The admin girl suggested that he go to the instrument itself and simply touch his hand to the very edge of the board on the right side. Everything seemed really simple and clear, and Aisen with interest examined the magic tool and brought his hand to the right place. The administrator meanwhile explained that the number of broken crystals would show the level of magical power. Rank K would be available if the crystal on the right shattered, and rank G if all 5 crystals shattered. At the same time, the average magic power of a new spiritualist could normally reach rank H. But after a few seconds, the admin girl stopped talking out of surprise, because all 5 crystals had turned into dust from Aisen's mere touch. Such an event did not go unnoticed by others present in the guild, and everyone was delighted by the incredible magical abilities of the new spiritualist. After all, the destruction of all 5 crystals at once was quite a rare event that is not seen every day. But there could be no mistake, and the admin girl filled in the necessary data about Aisen's enormous magical power, and preliminarily put a mark near the G rank. After that, the receptionist continued to diligently do the new preparation for the magic power measurement, and asked to wait for a while. Ison wanted to leave this establishment as soon as possible, because he already felt the attentive gazes of all the vacationing people. This time the girl offered to test his magic powers, but with a different kind of measuring board. As it turned out, this board could determine magical abilities that allowed to get higher ranks, and Ison was interested in such a possibility. After touching it, everything repeated as from the last experiment and all the crystals shattered. The admin girl sighed excitedly and decided to record the results. In the meantime, the noisy chatter and discussions of the incredible newcomer who was able to display tremendous magical abilities intensified in the room. After all, everyone present had never seen such a rapid advancement in ranks before. Ison felt the attentive stares and noticed that new people were gradually appearing in the room, while wondering if there were many people with D rank at all. Already predictably, the admin girl decided to mess up another magic board and asked Ison to repeat the procedure. This time the board showed ranks C, B, A, S, and Ison guessed about the high level of ranks and decided to finish with these experiments as soon as possible. With a light pressure of his hand, the first crystal instantly cracked and enthusiastic voices were heard from behind him. The discussion of the present guild members turned into a real show, and it began to annoy Ison, because he didn't want to feel too much attention. In the meantime, the girl administrator was about to send a message to the castle and could hardly contain her emotions, because she could not believe that some ordinary newcomer could immediately get a rank B. Ison could certainly hear the excited muttering of the receptionist, who was trying to remember how to properly file a non-standard report for the king himself. Meanwhile, the second crystal on the wooden board cracked and it caused the crowd to react noisily to the friendly sounds of beer mugs hitting. Ison realized that he might be in a dangerous situation thanks to his magical abilities and decided to fix it somehow. The spiritual teacher instantly began to control his magic power, and the destruction of the second crystal stopped at the cracking stage. And then there was complete silence in the room. The receptionist girl, who had already dreamed of telling the king herself the important news, asked sadly that it was all over. But in the end, the receptionist announced the completion of the measurement of magic power, and congratulated Ison on obtaining rank C, reminding him that it was an incredible achievement for a beginner. All the people present were also delighted and hurriedly filled their mugs and glasses to toast the success of the newcomer who had surprised them all. Ison, feeling the rays of glory, realized that the C rank he had obtained was clearly above average. The spiritual master thanked all the people present for their attention, but he was also happy that he was able to stop at this level. After all, if he managed to break a B rank crystal, the admin girl would immediately report this event to King Duke, and that could cause unpleasant events. Ison most wanted to travel without burdening his former disciples or any of the ordinary people, except for emergencies, of course. Meanwhile, the admin girl continued to congratulate the newcomer for his fine start as a guild member. Ison was already tired of all the noise and thanked the girl for her help. But before saying goodbye, the administrator Ketty, as a parting gift from the guild, offered lunch and drinks on the house, and it was foolish to refuse such an opportunity. Ison, holding his new guild card in his hands, was pleased to read about his new status. After that, Ison decided to talk to Rin about her magical powers, which clearly exceeded all those ranks. The spiritual teacher reminded the girl that because of her magical power, she could choose not to follow him and choose her own path. But Rin did not change her mind and promised to continue following her teacher, because it gave her real pleasure. Just at that moment, the same receptionist girl Ketty came to the table and apologized for the disturbance. Ison paid attention to the man who was next to Ketty, because he didn't want to make any new acquaintances. Ketty introduced the stranger as Dominic, a spiritualist of rank E who is a 10-year veteran, and explained that it would be a great decision for Ison to train with this man. Dominic promised to tell all the information he knew about spirits, as he always likes to get to know promising newcomers. Ison hadn't expected any parting lessons from the guild and looked at Dominic with surprise. But Ketty explained that every time a newcomer received his card, they gave him a free lesson so that he could acquire the necessary knowledge. Ison decided not to refuse the free lessons, because it would be foolish to lose the opportunity to learn something new. Moreover, the lessons are led by a real teacher, who is much better than a simple student. Ketty explained that using the company's tutorials, it would be like a game, and they usually hired specialists from the guild for this purpose. The admin girl talked about how the trust of the guild and the company is maintained through quality work, and of course everyone is interested in newcomers who are self-motivated to achieve their goals. Then Ketty mentioned Counselor Felicia, thanks to whom the training scheme for newcomers had been created. as well as a system of tutorials and various useful materials. And when Ketty wanted to thank Felicia, she talked about how she had gained all her knowledge thanks to her teacher's lessons, and therefore it was to him that everyone should be grateful for such achievements in learning. Ketty explained that that was why she had gotten the opinion that a certain teacher was a great and wise person. Aizen was very confused at this point, because in other territories he was treated much easier. But of course he did not reveal his real identity, and decided to learn more about this world. The spiritual teacher also recalled how he received a letter with a question from Felicia, and now he was happy to see the results of his advice, which really helped Felicia become an important advisor for the guild. Ketty then talked about how all the sorcerers were elsewhere at the moment and advised Rin not to be shy and also try to evaluate her magical abilities. Rin promised to think about it and did not reveal all her desires. Aizen decided to accept Ketty's offer after all and asked Dominic to take care of him and teach him something useful. Dominic was still benevolent and thanked him for this opportunity, because he didn't expect a newcomer with such a high rank to agree, since he himself only had an E rank. After that, Dominic took his student to the training room and began by telling him that a spirit mage from the name communicates with spirits and uses their magic and skills. And in essence, all this can be called asking for help from the spirits of nature. You can also consider it as making a contract with them, in order to be able to always use their powers. After a few seconds, Dominic decided to demonstrate his capabilities to his apprentice, and opening the small purse on his belt released a small spirit. Dominic explained that to be exact, it was a lower class light spirit that were one of his contracted spirits. Dominic also explained that in his case, he usually gets requests from cartographers and scouts, as he has flying spirits that inspect the area for demonic beasts, for example. Dominic immediately explained that since Aizen had chosen the path of an adventurer, the company would have fewer job offers for him, even though most people considered such a profession not worth pursuing. Aizen thanked for the advice and promised to prepare himself for different situations. Then Dominic suggested to start the first lesson and decided to first tell Aizen how to communicate with the spirit. To begin with, Dominic decided to show how exactly to create a magic ball, and after a few seconds he demonstrated his abilities. The magic ball flashed brightly and then it was absorbed by a small spirit. Aizen wondered if this was what communicating with the spirit was all about. Dominic explained that this was one method of rewarding the spirit with food. And if you give the spirit food in the form of magic, it will definitely help in the form of gratitude. So he summons the spirit with his magic and can even make it sing. Aizen of course knew about how spirits always show their honesty and nobility, and so they try to return everything they get from humans. Dominic asked his student if he could memorize such a spell, and Aizen confirmed his understanding of the process. The spiritual teacher instantly reproduced Dominic's spell to the delight of his new mentor. Dominic was surprised and said that it was unbelievable that Aizen was able to repeat the whole process the first time and create a brighter magic ball. Although it wasn't surprising since C-rank magic power is amazing and powerful. Aizen of course replied that it was all thanks to Dominic's lesson, and his little spirit was grateful to his mentor as well. Dominic laughed in response and even stroked the little spirit, thanking him for such an acknowledgement. The spirit responded with positive sounds, and Aizen explained that he must have developed a good relationship with Dominic. This added to Dominic's pride, and Aizen asked his mentor if he communicated with his spirit. But this caused Dominic to be surprised, and Aizen explained that the spirit actually talks to him a lot and he just needs to learn to understand the words. Dominic was surprised and cautiously asked if Aizen really understood the spirit language. Dominic talked about how his little spirit makes a squeaking sound when stroked, and if Aizen really understands all the emotions of the spirit and can explain its thoughts, it can be called an incredible ability. Dominic immediately rushed to pet the little spirit, which responded with a shrill squeak, and then asked Aizen to explain what he was talking about. Aizen of course perfectly understood the full meaning of the spirit's words, but eventually explained that the little magical creature was thanking Dominic for treasuring him. Also, the little spirit says that he absolutely doesn't care how many magic balls Dominic uses and is willing to stay with him. Dominic was shocked by the new discovery, and the little spirit was incredibly active and started jumping around happily. Aizen explained that he actually did nothing special and merely translated the spirit's words. But for Dominic, it proved to be an overwhelming accomplishment, and he called his student an amazing person. Dominic explained that it was actually very difficult for humans to understand the language of spirits, and only high-level spirit wizards could use the technique of talking to spirits. Such information came as a surprise to Aizen, for he had not expected such a problem with communicating with spirits in the human world. but Dominic confirmed the special rarity of such an ability. Dominic spoke of his extensive experience with spirits, but despite this, he could only learn a few of the simplest words. Dominic explained that he could only understand his spirit's feelings through movement, but nothing more. Though of course he had heard of how some people had the ability to speak the language of the spirits of their very birth, and he didn't expect to see such a person with his own eyes, especially if that person happened to be a newcomer. Eisen was surprised at how much praise Dominic was giving him and realized that this man was really very good since he was willing to acknowledge the achievements of others. Then Dominic apologized for his emotional surprise and explained that he really didn't expect such a thing from his student, which meant that Eisen had great potential. So it came out the other way around and he learned a lot from Eisen. Dominic then explained that this was the end of their lesson, for he had nothing more to teach Eisen. This surprised the spiritual teacher, for he had expected to talk to Dominic some more. But Dominic expressed his confidence that Eisen would make a first-class spirit wizard and he would give him positive recommendations for further advancement in the guild as a mentor. Dominic recognized the fact that Eisen was much better at communicating with spirits than he was, because admitting one's shortcomings was not a sign of weakness. Eisen was glad that his normal ability to talk to spirits would allow him to get a good grade. Then Dominic apologized for not being able to teach Eisen something interesting and new, but now he could confidently call him his colleague. Eisen thanked Dominic for a good lesson that allowed him to get to know an experienced spirit mage, but that only caused Dominic to laugh. After his all-too-quick lesson, Eisen returned to Rinna, who had already managed to get a map of the city from Ketty and immediately found the location of the inn. Eisen praised his student for her initiative and decided to go to one of the inns, especially since the guild registrar had told him that all the inns were quite good. Eisen wanted to choose the best place to stay, because he was going to stay in the city for a week. Rin had even talked to the bartender and found out that the exchange rate hadn't changed much in the last 20 years, so they would be able to live in a good hotel for 3 months on the money they had, because the magic backpack held more money than it looked like. The girl praised herself for her foresight, for she had taken a really large amount of money with her, which would allow them to not worry about their finances for an extended period of time. Eisen had already identified an opportunity to sell information about the territories they would be traveling through to cartographers. Just at that moment, a girl came to the table and happily approached Eisen and Rin. Eisen immediately recognized the girl who had lost her valuable key in the policy. This time the stranger first introduced herself and gave her name as Jurika. The girl was happy about this meeting and explained that she had already heard about the incredible newcomer to the guild and therefore decided to meet the mysterious man in person, and as it turned out she was not mistaken. Eisen completely ignored Jurika's joy and began to worry about his overly increased popularity, which could interfere with the secret journey. Jurika advised to address her much more simply and calling her by her first name would suffice, and then she spoke of her friendships with the guild workers who had allowed her to find out information about Eisen. Jurika about how she had heard about 2 incredible people with amazing magical abilities who had just registered with the guild and decided to immediately see them in person. And since she had already encountered such unique magical power before, she immediately guessed that she already knew these 2 unique newcomers. Jurika wondered if Eisen and Rin had indeed chosen the path of adventurers. Eisen confirmed this assumption of the girl and noticed the surprise on her face. Jurika then suggested that they go to her store nearby called the Alchemist's Garden, where they could find many of the most unique and useful remedies. The girl told about her assortment of alchemical tools and various materials for alchemy, and Eisen could find something useful for him. Eisen agreed to visit the store and look at the wide assortment of alchemy goods. The boy then explained that first he needed to find an inn before all the rooms were occupied. But Jurika immediately explained that her store was also an inn, so she could solve this problem and provide free rooms. Then the girl pointed out on the map the location of her store, which, as it turned out, was not that far to get to. Eisen thanked for the help and promised to take advantage of this opportunity, because apparently Juriko's store is really a great place for rest and shopping. Juriko promised to pay for the accommodation in gratitude for helping her find the valuable key, especially she herself wants to express her gratitude. Eisen decided not to argue with the girl and accepted her offer to stay at her inn. Rin supported her teacher, for she was ready to follow Eisen anywhere. Jurika was pleased and advised her to feel the hospitality of her inn right away. As it turned out, Juriko's store was only a short walk away from the Global Guild. The most surprising thing was that Juriko's store was the largest in the city and was located in a 4-story building. Once the travelers were inside the store, they were immediately greeted by one of the employees while calling Juriko the president. The polite employee immediately asked how he could help. Yuriko first introduced her new friends and then explained to the surprised Aizen that she was indeed the president of this store and hotel. Yuriko voiced her last name, Griffin, and offered to familiarize herself with her alchemical company called the Alchemist's Garden. Aizen together and Rin settled down in a comfortable sofa in the waiting room. The staff of the company meanwhile were discussing the guests and already knew how much they had helped President Yuriko. That being said, everyone was already aware of how much they were able to surprise with their magical abilities in the guild. The staff was well aware of how strong their president Yuriko was and couldn't understand how exactly the guild newcomer was able to help her. Although his magical abilities were questionable and looked like false rumors, Rin began to sense an environment that was similar to the one in the global guild. Aizen, on the other hand, was surprised at the speed at which rumors spread in this city, and it was most likely due to the close proximity of the guild. After a while, Yuriko returned and informed that the rooms would be ready very soon and then offered to talk. Aizen immediately asked why the president of the store, Yuriko, was outside the walls of the city alone and had lost a precious key in the process. The girl explained that she was searching for special herbs for future negotiations, and the herbs growing in the field were necessary for potion making, so she decided to gather them alone to prove her ability to find rare materials. Aizen appreciated the girl's desire to show off her abilities, but then the store manager, Stanley, who was with Yuriko, and apologized for his concern and thanked the girl for her help and decided to take part in the conversation. But Yuriko recalled how she herself decided to take on this difficult task and ended up losing the key to the magic warehouse through her carelessness. So in this situation, Aizen and Rin should be thanked, because they were the ones who helped complete this mission successfully. Stanley expressed his gratitude for helping President Yuriko, and also for saving important negotiations for their company, because these negotiations should determine the future development of their business. Aizen asked not to overestimate his accomplishments, for he had merely found a lost key that was lying quietly on the ground waiting for its owner. Yuriko laughed at that moment and then apologized, explaining that a strange thought had crossed her mind. The girl confessed about her strange feeling, because when she looks at Aizen, the man who trained her and who have similar energy, Aizen was interested in the said person and asked to tell more about him. Yuriko called this person a real master, as this girl taught her many important things and always said that you should do your best regardless of your position in the company. And everything Yuriko knows was taught to her by one of the 100 heroes, who later became the most successful president of the university. Rin was very surprised to learn that Yuriko's teacher was one of the 100 heroes, which meant she was Aizen's student. Yuriko continued to talk about her training and her knowledge that she gained through the university president of Mel's magic. Aizen immediately remembered his energetic student who always made him nervous and was surprised to learn such details about her. Yuriko told him that instead of attending the main school in the capital, she was studying at a branch school that was much closer. And her teacher Mel never sits in the capital and travels to different places. So for the past few years, Kunamiya has been teaching at a university near the city. Meanwhile, in the southern branch of the Magical University of Sarjadala City, in her office, the president Melrose received the report of the last week. The girl, despite her high status, thanked the assistant for the report and promised to study it thoroughly. Melrose continued to do magical tests and cast various spells, but the assistant reported about a man who wants to meet her, and the most interesting thing is that this man looks too suspicious and constantly hides his face behind a magic mask. Mel, of course, recognized her old friend and asked to let him into the office. The girl greeted His Majesty Duke, who is very rarely so far away from the capital. Duke instantly took off his mask and explained his visit by important work nearby. Then the local king decided to tell something interesting about Master Aizen and promised to fulfill very soon the most cherished wish of all the students, which they had been dreaming about for so long. Duke told about his constant magical rituals, which helped to know that a powerful prophet would soon appear in this world, and all they had to do was to wait for this moment. Melrose was delighted. You really wanted to see your teacher. But Duke explained that unfortunately the magic ritual could not give detailed information about who exactly would be this prophet, as well as when his appearance would take place, and unfortunately these details were hidden at this stage of research. But Mel already understood that the results of these rituals are quite high, and whoever comes to this world as a prophet will have invaluable abilities. Therefore, she herself would like to welcome that person, especially if it would really be Teacher Aizen. Duke revealed that he had already given special instructions to the guild, and so the only thing left to do was to wait for the prophet to appear. Mel then decided to finish her important work as soon as possible so that she could have free time to meet Master Aizen. Duke agreed with his friend and was also looking forward to that moment. Duke congratulated his former classmate for becoming such an influential person and achieving master status in the global guild in Ryonir City. The girl admitted that she actually enjoys the role very much, although it is challenging and tedious at times, but at the same time it allows her to teach the children and enjoy interacting with them. Mel talked about her weekly report on how many different specialists of each rank had appeared in the City Guild, and it was very easy to check each class and guild ranks, especially this season's numbers were pretty good. As it turned out, there were currently D-rank guild members, as well as some individuals possessing C-rank. Duke was happy to hear that more and more people were willing to work hard for the good of the capital. But Mel admitted that unfortunately there was some bad news amongst all the good news. As it turned out, the number of monsters around the city had increased over the past few months. And although the guild now has a lot of guys with high physical strength at its disposal, there is a shortage of talented wizards, and it affects the effectiveness of the fight against monsters. Duke agreed that all of this could lead to a decrease in public safety and asked Mel to consider sending professional wizards on this assignment immediately after returning to the capital. Mel promised to do her best and try to solve the problem as soon as possible, and promised to send the most up-to-date reports on the case. Duke suggested sending a letter to Master Eisen immediately, though of course it was better if the teacher was around. Meanwhile, waking up in the morning, Eisen was surprised by Rin's behavior as she continued to sleep. Usually this responsible girl got up much earlier, and already had time to do some business of her own. But now Rin continued to enjoy her dreams. The beautiful young girl apparently saw something good in her dream and smiled, so Eisen decided not to disturb Rin and quietly left the room. But after a few minutes, the young beauty sighed languidly and woke up, and the spiritual teacher greeted the girl with an awakening. Rin immediately began to apologize for not waking up much earlier, and was very excited, because she had never slept so long before. Eisen asked the girl to calm down. There was nothing wrong with sleeping a few hours longer than usual. Especially they were in a different world and could live by different rules. But Rin was still upset, for as a student she sincerely wanted to take care of her teacher, and never let her guard down. Eisen asked her not to blame herself for this and to calm down. But Rin recalled the many letters in which all the previous students had shown concern for their teacher, and were always worried about his condition. Eisen reminded the girl how tired she was yesterday, especially her biological clock had shifted a bit due to the fact that they were traveling around the world, and there was nothing wrong with feeling weak and tired. Rin was imbued with her teacher's words and decided to wake up the next day at the same time as her spiritual teacher. After all, Eisen's endurance was incredibly great and she would need to adapt to her new surroundings. Eisen was pleased with his students' eagerness and of course knew that Rin would do her best, although it would not be a bad thing for her to increase her physical strength. Rin, on the other hand, was ready for anything and was now fully awake. Eisen suggested that after breakfast the girl familiarize herself with the city and its surroundings during a walk. Rin gladly accepted the offer and was looking forward to a new little journey through the unknown city. After a delicious breakfast, the travelers went to the city streets already warmed by the morning sun and decided to explore all the most interesting places. The streets of the city were lively from the very morning, and numerous merchants were carefully laying out the best goods. Among the goods offered were not only foodstuffs, and of course clothes and a variety of items. Rin was surprised to see a store that offered to buy juice from the special fruits of the city of Ryonir. The juice turned out to be really refreshing and delighted the taste buds of Eisen and Rin. After visiting the shopping district, the travelers went to look at the best sights of the city and then visited the famous horse farm. Afterward, the spiritual teacher and his student climbed to the roof of the tall building of the alchemist's garden and enjoyed a beautiful view of the city against the backdrop of majestic mountains. The scenery of the peaceful city pleased Eisen, who still remembered the terrible times when people fought demons. Rin mentally thanked Yuriko for allowing her to be on the rooftop and feel all that pleasure. Eisen remembered that there was supposed to be a branch of a magical university behind the huge hill, but he didn't see it now, and that surprised the spiritual teacher. Rin decided to clarify if this was the place where his former student Mel should be now. Eisen didn't tell how great a sorceress Mel was, because Rin knew this information herself from the letters she had read, so the spiritual teacher promised to introduce them. Rin was pleased at this offer, for she had not even hoped for such a meeting. Eisen decided that there would be no problem, and good connections never hurt during a long journey. Rin of course agreed to meet the legendary representative of the 100 Heroes Mel, whom she had read about and knew a lot about her life, because for her such an acquaintance would be a real gift. Suddenly there was a very loud ringing of the bell, and Rin explained that this was the bell of the Global Guild to announce the coming of noon, and she had read about it in one of the letters. Aizen hadn't even expected the journey through the city to take so long. Aizen offered to have lunch at the Global Guild, as the long walk had made her hungry. Rin of course agreed, for in this city some meals were served exclusively at the guild and it was worth spending a little extra money. The vegetables and meat were excellent and the dinner was a real pleasure for the travelers. Rin showed her knowledge again and told them that there was a fertile land nearby where the best vegetables were grown, and the farm next to it raises cattle and the meat is a local delicacy. The girl learned all this from Mel's letter. Aizen was very happy about his visit to this wonderful town, and so far it was the best part of the trip. Suddenly Ketty's voice came from behind and she was happy to see Aizen and Rin. The admin girl was still very happy that the travelers hadn't left the city yet, and decided to have a little chat. As it turned out, the excited Ketty decided to ask the talented newcomer and his companion for help. Aizen was interested in such a request and decided to listen to the details. Ketty told of a wind spirit that was making a ruckus in the farmland near the town, so they have to fight it. But unfortunately there is not enough power at the guild's disposal, because a spirit is a creature that can only be dealt with by a spirit wizard. Ketty confessed about the dire situation and so she has to ask for help. Aizen agreed that it was indeed an emergency and so they must act urgently. Ketty talked about how innocent people could be affected in farmland and orchards would be destroyed. Although there are no casualties at the moment, if this continues, the town will eventually be in serious danger. Aizen agreed with Ketty and thought about a solution to the troubled spirit. The spirit teacher knew from Mel's letters that all the students at the magical university were very talented mages, and it would be unforgivable if the students she was so proud of were hurt during this event. As a result, Aizen promised to help with the wind spirit. Ketty was delighted and decided to formalize this as a special request for Aizen and Rin, as a result of which they could receive a worthy reward. Aizen was inspired by his first assignment as an adventurer and decided to head to the scene as soon as possible. Rin was looking forward to new adventures with her teacher. Ketty thanked her for her help and offered to follow her, as she should introduce the person who would explain everything in detail and go on the mission with them. That person turned out to be Dominic, who was a bit surprised to see a talented C-ranked rookie and his lovely companion. Aizen greeted Dominic, who immediately admitted that he would be honored to work together with such a capable and unique person. Aizen promised to use his skill of communicating with spirits and somehow solve the problem, but he would certainly not refuse Dominic's help. The offer was mutually accepted and Dominic promised to be there to help in case of danger. Dominic suggested that the upcoming task should not be very pleasant. Aizen realized this himself and so he asked Ketty to elaborate on the spirit that was troubling people. Ketty quickly brought a map of the area and pointed out the location of the forest between the farm and the orchard. And so it is necessary to make a thing similar to the wind spirit in order for it to calm down. Ketty suggested that one could use the subdue and repel method, or some other known method to deal with the wind spirit. Rin decided that basically they could use anything to solve this problem. Ketty didn't want to go into details about the methods of subduing the wind spirit and only hoped for a quick resolution to this unpleasant situation, though she reminded them that the enemy was quite strong and that they had to be careful. Ketty also explained that, according to the evidence of the farmers, tornadoes suddenly appear in the forest, but the wind spirit itself is not visible, so its class is unknown. Aizen tried to find out the reason why the spirit became aggressive towards people, because there must be something that led to this dangerous situation. Ketty agreed that spirits really don't start behaving aggressively for no reason. However, when the scouts asked the eyewitnesses, they said that everything happened suddenly, and thus it could be said that the wind spirit became angry for unknown reasons. As a result, Ketty identified two priorities, the first of which was to calm the wind spirit, and the second was to find out the cause of its anger and therefore need to act carefully. Ketty also promised to pay good money for the information she received. Aizen grinned at how his task had become drastically more complicated in a few minutes, but he still didn't refuse it. Dominic also realized the complexity of the assignment, which was no less than D rank, and it could cause additional difficulties. He admitted to Ketty that this was the case and that the spirit, which was not affected by physical attacks, had gone on a rampage for reasons unknown to them, and of course the task was no less difficult than a D rank. Dominic assumed that the difficulty of the task could only increase during the process, and that he should be ready for it. He was only sent to do this task because he had been a spirit mage for 10 years, and yet he felt uneasy about it. At that, Dominic noticed the complete lack of excitement in Aizen and his girlfriend. Although of course it was all because of his high C rank, Dominic himself didn't feel confident. Dominic said that for someone who was immediately rated C rank to go on a mission with a difficulty of D, it was like becoming a forest demon into which guilty priests turned. But Eisen was not the usual brash promising newcomer, so he would be very pleased to work with him. Eisen thanked Dominic for such high praise and suggested that they leave immediately for the mission. Dominic and Rin supported the spiritual teacher and agreed to follow him. Ketty advised them to take with them the regeneration potions that were publicly available in the guild and asked everyone to be careful. Soon after, the team of adventurers was already well outside the city and headed towards the farmland. Once near the forest, the travelers immediately heard a strange sound and then saw a tornado of enormous size approaching in the distance. The tornado seemed to grow larger with each passing second, and the strong wind was felt more and more strongly, which raised dust and tore leaves off the trees. According to the scout stories, a wind spirit was sitting in the center of the tornado, and now the tornado was gradually turning into a real storm. Dominic advised to bypass this storm because of its too wide range of effects, and then decided to lead the others along a safe route. Advancement became more and more difficult with every meter, and finally Dominic decided to use the help of his spirit and protect himself from the effects of the storm. After a few seconds, a protective dome formed around Dominic, and he suggested to stay closer to it, because then Eisen and Rin would not feel the gusts of wind and would be able to save their strength until the right moment. Eisen meanwhile turned to the earth and the atmosphere for help. Dominic felt the protective magic that Eisen used, but the spiritual teacher decided not to waste time on explanations and suggested to move forward. Thanks to the protective sphere, it was very comfortable to move despite the hurricane wind. Eisen thanked Dominic, since he didn't get debris in his eyes. The guild instructor thanked Eisen for the praise and would be happy to help in this situation. But despite the protective magic, everyone realized that they had to be extremely careful because the wind spirit was very strong. Suddenly, Eisen ordered Dominic to quickly sit down, and the guild instructor instantly knelt down and then asked what was going on. Eisen explained that the stone spirit had warned him of danger in the form of a flying board fragment. A few seconds later, the protective dome was punctured by the board, which instantly embedded itself in the ground, flying over Dominic's head. This stunned the instructor, for he almost died and thought it was a prediction. But Eisen explained that it was not a prediction, but only the ability to hear the voices of the surrounding nature spirits, because it allows you to control the situation. Dominic was fascinated and didn't understand how it was even possible to hear the spirits in such a strong wind. But Eisen explained that with certain skills it was quite easy, and this surprised Dominic even more, who sincerely admired the abilities of the unique newcomer. After that, Eisen allowed Dominic to get up, for now he was in no danger. Walking a little further forward into the center of the hurricane, the adventurers were still able to see the spirit that was bothering everyone so much. Eisen looked with interest at the spirit that had caused the strong tornado, and Dominic admitted that he could not determine the spirit's level at such a distance, and then offered to come closer. But suddenly the wind spirit began to transform and emitted an unpleasant shrill sound. And after a few seconds the cocoon opened, and inside it was an ordinary looking girl. This surprised Dominic and he came even closer. Then Dominic said that if this spirit can take human form, then it has great magical power and is a higher spirit. Dominic sensed the danger and told of spirits that could change their appearance and hibernate, which was why the scouts couldn't find out the level of this spirit. Elder spirits only live in secluded places like a sacred mountain or a magical spring. And in order to challenge this spirit must have at least a rank, otherwise it is difficult to hope for success. Dominic realized that a C rank mage would not be able to defeat such a spirit, and this task is a minimum of B rank. But Dominic decided as a professional to help the two newcomers to escape. They were too young to live. Dominic looked at the spirit that was slowly approaching, but noticed the lack of hostility. Even so, Dominic decided to strengthen his defenses and prepare for battle. But the wind spirit in the form of a girl with a single movement of her hand created a strongest wind current that literally blew Dominic away and shrouded everything around him in dust. Dominic couldn't resist the huge force and crashed into the first tree and felt a great pain in his back. Dominic thanked the small protective sphere that had enveloped him before the impact, otherwise he would have been killed by the magic wind. The spirit released a huge amount of magical power with just a single finger movement, and Dominic realized the danger the newcomer was in. Despite the intense pain in his body, Dominic was glad that he was the only one hurt during this attack. Therefore, he needed to become spirit bait as soon as possible and give the newcomers a chance to escape. But as soon as Dominic tried to get to his feet, he realized that his body was not obeying, and as if paralyzed after the strong blow. Dominic decided that Ison would be attacked next and ordered him to run. But the spiritual teacher asked him not to worry about his life and used the staff cut spell. The wind spirit attacked with the magic wind again, but this time the magic power was countered by Ison. The spiritual teacher was able to reflect thanks to his staff the magical energy directed at him, which bypassed him like a wave of stone. Dominic was shocked by the newcomer's ability and finally asked in a trembling voice how Ison was able to do such a thing. The spiritual teacher smilingly replied that he had only applied a bit of special magic. In fact, Ison had used prophecy magic to turn his staff into something capable of shattering the magic wind with a single blow. But of course Ison didn't want to explain all the details of what had happened, because that would cause Dominic to ask even more unnecessary questions. The wind spirit decided not to dwell on the failed attempt and attacked Ison again. But the spiritual teacher repeated his trick and continued to stand unharmed, and then bid his opponent to continue in the same rhythm. After pausing for a moment, the wind spirit intensified the effects of her magic power and attacked. But Ison once again cut the oncoming wave of magic wind thanks to his magic staff. This attack was followed by further attacks, but nothing could harm the spirit teacher who was deftly wielding the magic staff. While Ison was repelling the wind spirit's main attacks, young Rin was protecting Dominic from the rocks flying at crazy speeds and reflecting them with her blades. Dominic was delighted with the girl's abilities and praised her for her excellent close combat skills. Rin didn't even immediately realize that Dominic was praising her, but the experienced instructor confirmed the purpose of his delight. But despite their success in defending against the wind spirit's attacks, Dominic decided that they still wouldn't be able to face such a strong opponent. The experienced adventurer explained that absolutely any attacks would be useless against the Elder Spirit, because only a rank adventurers could fight this creature on equal footing. But Ison wasn't going to fight the wind spirit and surprised Dominic even more with this decision. Dominic asked if Ison wanted to communicate with the wind spirit, because it was too risky. Dominic was sure that the wind spirit would not want to talk to the man or might get offended and aggressive during the conversation, and then they would all be seriously hurt. Ison advised not to worry about anything and not to be afraid, and then promised to deal with the problem on their own, and there is hope for a positive result. The spiritual teacher took a few steps towards the girl and greeted her, and then offered to talk for a few minutes. Despite Dominic's fears, the girl did not attack the interlocutor, but only looked at Ison in surprise and finally answered, which confirmed the spiritual teacher's expectations. Ison realized that the girl had consciousness and her eyes testified to the presence of mind. The spiritual creature continued to look at the man intently and spoke a few more words. Dominic still expected something bad and prepared to attack the wind spirit to help the newcomers leave this dangerous area. The spirit girl then expressed her annoyance with the human language and explained that if Ison didn't start speaking the spirit language, she wouldn't communicate with him. The spirit girl suddenly called the spirit teacher a prophet, which surprised even him. Then she talked about how he had defeated evil gods and sword demons in the past while protecting the Spirit Queen, and had also learned the magic of the current Spirit King. Ison confirmed the girl's words, who rejoiced at this incredible encounter, and then confessed that she was a big fan of the spirit teacher. The girl explained that Ison is actually very famous in the spirit world, because he is the hero who saved the spirit world and everyone loves him. And her personal mentor is a relative of the departed Spirit Emperor, who was kind and cheerful, and also had great power and constantly took care of the spirits. Ison had never heard such a thing, and although he had indeed defeated the evil gods, he didn't consider himself a hero to the spirits at all. After all, he was essentially in another universe, and he didn't even know about the spirit world. The girl explained her aggressive state by her abrupt awakening from anabiosis, because of which she could not immediately recognize Ison. For some reason, the spiritual teacher compared this girl to a cat that was sleeping curled up and was suddenly awakened. Dominic, of course, did not understand what the newcomer was talking about with this dangerous opponent, because for him it was just high-low sounds, and so he continued to be wary and ready to attack. But Ison explained to the Dominic that the girl was actually quite friendly and asked him to give him some time to talk to her. The girl confirmed her expectations, because she had heard before about how difficult the language of spirits is for people, as it is saturated with magic. But Ison communicated perfectly well in this difficult language. Although the job of a prophet is to communicate freely in this magical language, and it is logical that Ison is well versed in it. The spiritual teacher then asked the girl why she was creating such a strong wind. The girl was surprised at this remark and explained that she was only making a small breeze to warn people. Aizen explained to the girl that for her it was certainly a small breeze, but for the ordinary people, they had to face a real strong hurricane that scared them very much. The spiritual teacher realized how different the perception of reality was between spirits and humans, and if this girl really wanted to attack, she would most likely launch several streams of wind at him. Then the guy asked what the girl wanted to warn ordinary people about. The spirit girl told about the demonic monsters that were spreading miasma in this forest, and it could soon lead to huge troubles. Miasma is a special magical power that enhances the influence of demons. It causes mutations in the body of a person or a spirit depending on how much of it is inhaled. In the same way, the evil god turned his body into miasma. Because of this, the evil god dispersed his flesh throughout the Mercury. Aizen asked the girl if she was aware of the existence of other such places infected with miasma, while the spirit teacher suggested that most likely some demonic beasts had eaten chunks of the evil god's flesh and greatly enhanced their abilities. The spirit girl confirmed this and became visibly distressed at the impending danger. Aizen knew that when demonic beasts ate the flesh of an evil god, a special miasma-producing organ was created in their body. The girl explained that the Spirit King had ordered her to keep people away from these demonic beasts until they were destroyed, and that's why she decided to create some light winds to scare people away and keep them away from the danger. Aizen realized the reason for the hurricane wind and then asked her to tell him about the demonic beast that had appeared in detail. The girl told him that such a monster is called a horned mole, and it is very similar to a mole with a large horn. This monster has not too outstanding physical abilities and usually hides underground or in dense trees. The girl stated that since she was not very good at precision attacks, she was unable to defeat the monster on her own, and to stop the spread of the miasma, it was necessary to destroy the monster as soon as possible. Dominic continued to watch the newcomer's communication with the Supreme Spirit with astonishment, and felt envious, because despite his vast experience, he had never been able to learn such an art. In the end, Dominic, not understanding the essence of the conversation, decided to trust Aizen, who apparently successfully negotiated with the dangerous spirit being. But then Dominic noticed the hand gesture and decided that the higher spirit was displeased with something and immediately became agitated in preparation for battle. Meanwhile, the girl talked about her fatigue after the long and fruitless attacks against the monster and explained her sleep by her desire to rest. Aizen gradually figured out the whole chain of events that had been happening in this forest lately. Rin also watched her favorite teacher carefully and suggested that Dominique rest for a while, for she was fully confident that Aizen would completely fix the situation. Aizen, having found out everything he needed to know, asked the spirit girl to remove the terrible storm that was scaring people, and in the meantime he would try to do something about the demonic beast. The spirit girl thanked Aizen for his help, because she didn't even expect that the glorified hero of the spirit world would be by her side and solve the problem with the monster. Aizen reminded about his true role as a prophet, because he should always help both people and spirits in solving problems. The girl hoped for the prophet's abilities and promised to keep an eye on him, and in case he failed to destroy the monster, she would again create a hurricane to warn people. Aizen agreed to such conditions and offered to start hunting the monster. The girl in turn promised to thank the hero of the spirit world in case he destroyed the nasty monster. The girl wished good luck to the spiritual teacher and suggested that during their next meeting they talk a little longer, because she was very bored of being alone all the time. In order to increase the view over the forest, the spiritual girl flew upwards, which incredibly surprised Dominic, who had never encountered such a strong spirit before. Afterward, Dominic called Aizen a truly amazing person who was able to make the higher spirit go away with a normal conversation. Aizen explained that he hadn't actually chased the higher spirit away, but had merely received an important task from her. The spirit teacher then quickly explained the whole point of the conversation. Dominic was surprised when he found out that the higher spirit was actually protecting people, because he was sure that she was trying to cause destruction, and now he was ashamed of his accusations. But Aizen reassured the experienced adventurer, for he was indeed right and this terrible hurricane was a danger to the people. Dominic thanked his spiritual teacher, for now he felt much better. Dominic then determined the task of destroying the horned mole to be rank D in terms of difficulty. Aizen was surprised that even monsters were separated by rank, though apparently this system applied to any definitions for guild members. Dominic explained that it was a demonic beast and had sufficient strength. In addition, demonic beasts with miasma power were defined one rank higher than normal beasts. Thus it turns out that a demonic beast that generates miasma is equivalent to C rank, and it is a worthy opponent for Aizen with the same rank. Dominic advised him to be careful, as he would be facing a ferocious opponent with unknown expectations. Aizen asked Dominic if he was sure that he wanted to join the battle, because he was the one who had decided to take on the task of a higher spirit and Dominic was not obliged to take part in it. But Dominic wanted to be helpful during this assignment. After all, he was already leaving all the main work on the newcomer, and now he felt awkward. The spiritual teacher thanked Dominic for his willingness to help and offered to do this difficult mission together and keep the local farmers safe. Meanwhile, Rin was looking carefully at the thicket of the forest and thanks to her enhanced hearing she heard something strange. Aizen explained to Dominic that Rin had already noticed the monsters approaching so they wouldn't even have to look for them and waste precious time. As the sound intensified and the monsters approached, young Rin bared her blades and warned of the approaching danger. As it turned out, there were several monsters, and they all differed in size. Aizen immediately identified the largest one, which was the boss, and kept behind the others. Dominic assumed that most likely the monsters were activated after the disappearance of the hurricane and suddenly took the initiative, believing that he himself could defeat these monsters. Aizen asked Dominic to stop, but the experienced adventurer decided to destroy the monsters as quickly as possible, because otherwise the Supreme Spirit would make a terrible hurricane again. But the spiritual teacher explained that in fact there are much more monsters than it seems at first glance and you cannot act so carelessly. Aizen was right, of course, and a few minutes later a huge number of horned moles came out of the ground. All this greatly reduced Dominic's confidence and he was no longer so desperate to run forward. Dominic was shocked because after only a few minutes he was faced with no less than 20 horrible horned moles, which were extremely aggressive. Aizen was surprised at what he saw as much as Dominic, because the girl spirit did not warn about such a large number of monsters, and most likely the monsters multiplied because of the influence of miasma. To confirm this theory, smaller horned moles began to appear. Under the influence of miasma, any living creature greatly accelerated its development and desire to reproduce. But nevertheless, the strength of the youngsters was at the level of adults and they had to fight 20 C-rank monsters. Dominic evaluated his abilities and said that it was a bad idea to fight so many high-ranked monsters, and the ideal solution would be to kill the boss that spreads miasma and strengthens its kin. Dominic suggested that if they managed to destroy the boss, then all the other monsters would stop behaving so aggressively and maybe even run away. Aizen agreed with this idea and thought about the possibility of quickly destroying the boss, which still had to be reached. But there was no way to get to the boss quickly, and the spiritual teacher noticed that the monsters were not afraid of them at all and apparently took them as tasty prey. Rin agreed that the monsters didn't see them as a threat and that could be taken advantage of. Dominic suggested not to get distracted by secondary targets and just destroy all the monsters in their path. Although they look like large moles, one must remember that they are actually powerful demons. Aizen carefully watched the organized approach of the monsters and advised his friends to prepare for battle. The horned moles instantly accelerated and rushed toward their prey. Dominic was once again convinced of the skill of Aizen's prediction, who had spoken in advance about this reaction of the monsters. Dominic immediately used the small spirit spell Light Bullet and was able to repel the first attack of several monsters, which fell to the ground with a piercing squeak. At the same time, the other congeners of the demonic creatures did not stop and only accelerated their attack. Dominic tried to repeat his battle spell, but some of the individuals were already nearby and immediately attacked him with their two sharp horns. Aizen instantly came to Dominic's aid and destroyed one of the most active monsters and then asked his partner if he was alright. Dominic was a bit shocked at what was happening, as he was almost impaled by a nasty horn. In the next second, Dominic noticed behind Aizen's back a ghastly toothy maw, which was rapidly approaching the human body, and he shouted, hoping to warn his partner. But this time it was the beautiful Rin who was the fastest, and thanks to her two blades she ended the life of the horrible monster. Aizen thanked his apprentice, who was there at the right time. But Rin advised his teacher not to worry, especially since he himself knew the danger and could handle the monster alone. Aizen thanked her for her desire to save his teacher's life, and Rin confessed that she liked it when they were able to cope with danger together. Dominic admired the girl's ability to fight in close combat, and Rin, noticing the experienced adventurer's gaze, admitted that she only occasionally practiced. But in any case she would try to protect everyone with her sharp blades. But the number of monsters was increasing and Aizen advised her not to waste her strength, because something else should be done here. The strange behavior of the main monster became noticeable and Aizen decided that now the monsters didn't dare to come closer, and it seemed like the boss was ordering them to flee by creating a certain vibration in the ground. The spiritual teacher decided to kill the monsters before they ran away, because then it would take a long time to find them. Eisen turned to the powers of the atmosphere for help, and then created a wind blade spell that instantly rushed towards the opponents. The magical attack was so fast that it instantly destroyed a huge number of monsters that were slashed. Dominic was delighted by the effect of the magic attack since he had never seen such powerful magic before. The spiritual teacher scrutinized the results of his attack, which were not only the corpses of many monsters, but also cut down trees, and decided that the source of the miasma was now definitely destroyed. Dominic recognized that this kind of magic spell was much more powerful than a higher spirit tornado, and even a rank B wizard wouldn't be able to create something more powerful. Dominic inquired from which magic book Eisen had learned about such a rare and powerful spell. Eisen decided that because of such a powerful spell he would be questioned, and explained that he had managed to invent this spell a long time ago, and he himself had not expected such an effect. People learned the basic techniques of the prophets' magic from the prophets themselves, or restored them by spiritual voices in the houses where the prophets lived. Of course, there were also special books that were compiled by the retired spiritual emperor, and were a source of great knowledge. Eisen remembered how he had gradually improved his skills, and it had taken a huge amount of time. And when he tried to use them, there was an inner voice that helped him learn various powerful skills. Dominic once again convinced of the uniqueness of the young novice, because to improve his skills and magic on his own, such even a professional of a rank cannot, and he absolutely knows about it, as a person who tried to do it. Eisen explained that he was able to do all this because he had some free time before he joined the guild. Just at that moment, someone's scream sounded and the travelers saw a man approaching. No one knew this strange man, and everyone looked at the man who was out of breath from running. As it turned out, it was the owner of the earlier and the farm, who hurriedly expressed his gratitude for saving his business. The man explained that he was the one who had reported the monsters to the guild and the magic university. Eisen didn't immediately understand why the man had sought help from two places at once. The owner of the farm explained that it certainly cost extra money, but it was much more reliable to do so, because his land began to disturb not only the terrible spirit, but also hordes of demons. So he was very happy to see the saviors. Suddenly, at this moment, Dominic felt weak and instantly began to fall to the ground, losing consciousness. Eisen rushed to help his partner and asked if he was all right. Dominic decided that he had probably spent too much magical energy in this battle, and now he felt too miserable and tired. But Eisen asked him not to worry about it, because everyone had different degrees of fatigue depending on the situation, and Dominic shouldn't blame himself for his lack of energy. Meanwhile, the hospitable owner of the farm offered the rescuers a lunch of specially grown vegetables. According to the cheerful man, the peculiarity of the special vegetables was that they could restore magical energy, and so he would be glad to help in this matter. Eisen gladly accepted the farmland master's offer and decided that it was time to rest. The owner of the farmland offered to follow him and explained that his house was very close by. Half an hour later, everyone was already sitting at the table in the farmer's house enjoying fresh vegetables and hot, flavorful bread. The hospitable man was happy to have a chance to thank his rescuers and offered more and more delicious fruits. Eisen rejoiced at the opportunity, for this was the first time he had been thanked for his action as an adventurer. Dominic suggested that the spiritual teacher take his time returning to the city, for he had used a great deal of magical energy and should rest. In the meantime, he himself would go first and submit a report of the completed task to the guild. Dominic explained that if he reported back early, the payment for the mission would increase slightly. And since he did absolutely nothing in the battle, he wanted to at least rush to report to the guild about saving the farmland. Eisen decided that he could indeed stay at this beautiful farm for a while, and continue to enjoy the delicious vegetables. Rin agreed with her teacher, as the sun was still very high and so they could take their time getting back to town. But after spending a few more hours at the farm, the travelers said goodbye to their host and headed back to town. As it turned out, the effect of the fruits and vegetables was quite high, and now the spiritual teacher felt fully restored and rested. Eisen felt as if he had taken a low-level potion, even though he had just eaten a meal of delicious vegetables. The spiritual teacher then recalled how he had received a letter from his disciple, who reported that he had become the owner of a farm where he was happily engaged in the development and improvement of magical energy restoring seeds. Such seeds were only distributed to a few trusted farmers, and such magical products are researched, cultivated and distributed by each company under careful supervision. On the way back to the city, Eisen felt a great feeling after completing the difficult mission, and was now looking forward to the next task, which was bound to be positive. Rin then turned her attention to the teacher's staff, in the center of which the magic book glowed again. Such a glow could only speak of one thing, that somewhere nearby was the sealed power of Eisen. The spiritual teacher agreed that perhaps he had indeed left a piece of his magical power somewhere in the area, and began to use his staff as a compass. After walking a bit ahead and recognizing the right direction thanks to the amplified light of the magic book, after a few minutes, Eisen located the place where his magic power was sealed. Eisen was very happy with the success and called today a very successful day. Rin, meanwhile, watched with interest as the magic page burst out of the huge stone and returned to its master. The process of breaking the seal took a few seconds and the magical page took its place in the book. Rin marveled at the rapid return of the prophet's power, for they had already found the second page. But Eisen called it all a mere coincidence, for he had not expected to find another part of his sealed power in this place. This time, the spiritual teacher had obtained the ability to expand the range of prophecies, and now the area that the prophecies covered had apparently grown considerably. Rin was thrilled with the teacher's enhanced prophetic abilities and was looking forward to seeing Eisen in his prime. The spirit teacher was also very happy with the events that had happened today, as they were able to finish the hard work, enjoy some delicious fresh vegetables, and also regain some of their magic power. And so it was much more pleasant to return to the city. After a while, the travelers found themselves in the Global Guild, where they were met by a delighted Ketty. As it turned out, all members of the guild were already aware of the heroic deed of Eisen, who was able to perform the most difficult task to subdue the Supreme Spirit and wanted to personally welcome this unique man. Of course, Dominic was also here, who had already told about all the events that had happened on the farm. Dominic immediately explained that he had managed to report the results of the mission and that this had caused quite a stir in the guild. Ketty was surprised at the lack of injuries on Eisen's body after such a difficult task. Eisen confirmed that neither he nor his apprentice had any injuries and they were feeling fine after their vacation at the farm. Ketty continued to cheer and look closely at the travelers. The guild administrator then thanked them for safely completing their task and returning safely to the guild. Eisen realized that Ketty was very worried about him and then asked why there were so many people here. Ketty talked about how she had received a report from the Magic University saying that there had been a strange reaction and demonic beasts were suspected to be in the area of the farmlands. Eisen immediately remembered how the owner of the company told about his inquiry to the Magical University, and apparently this was the answer to this inquiry. Ketty confirmed that it was exactly like that. The girl told about how the guild and the Magical University of the city have been working together for several years now, and they receive information about magic and the latest magical tools that are only available at the university. Though of course there are times when the exchange of information doesn't happen as quickly as one would like, and that's why the response to this request came too late. And since in addition to the restless spirit, there were a large number of horned moles in the area, fueled by miasma, the difficulty of this task had increased significantly and reached a minimum of rank B at the same time. The wind-creating spirit was characterized as supreme, and because there were only 3 adventurers in this dangerous place, the entire Global Guild was very worried and had already started organizing a rescue team. Eisen now realized why the guild had such a huge number of trained adventurers. But after Dominic returned first to the guild and reported the positive result of the mission, everyone was confused and began to wait for Eisen and Rin to return. Ketty told how impressive the news of how Eisen had confronted the higher spirit, calmed it down, and stopped the tornado had been to the guild. Eisen confirmed these events, which elicited enthusiastic cheers from the adventurers present, who began to question whether the unique newcomer really only possessed a C rank. The spiritual teacher paid attention to the people's reactions and didn't understand their admiration, because any person who could talk to a spirit would immediately realize that they could easily get along with him. But of course Ketty did not know all the subtleties of communicating with spirits and still admired the accomplishment of this difficult task, continuing to call Eisen the most incredible person she had ever seen in her life. Then the admin girl explained the admiration by saying that Eisen had succeeded so well in a task that could not be done by a person with only C rank. The girl then talked about the profession of detective that existed in the guild, and thanks to this profession one can see lies. Therefore, there was no doubt about Dominic's report. But all these incredible events were so unexpected that they caused doubt at first. Eisen pondered that talking to spirits and destroying monsters was something he had been doing for many years, and it seems he was appreciated for the difficult job. I am actually the most ordinary job for him. After the explanation, Ketty apologized for the difficult tasks because she sent the newcomers to a place where the request was much more difficult than reported and they were in mortal danger. But the spiritual teacher asked the girl not to worry because she did not do it on purpose and learned about the real danger much later. And the main thing is that everything ended well. Aizen also explained that in fact he did a lot of things, including the destruction of monsters without permission, but on his own initiative, and in general he only wanted to fulfill the request, and therefore Ketty should not blame herself for the actions of another person. The girl thanked for the calming words, because now it was much easier, and she once again expressed her gratitude for the fulfillment of such a dangerous assignment. And since the reward had increased considerably, it would take some time to prepare everything and Aizen would have to wait a bit. Aizen didn't mind waiting, but he decided to clarify how much the reward had increased. Ketty told about the decision to increase the reward because of a special occasion, and the guild's upper management supported the proposal. And since she didn't have anything special at her disposal, she was just ready to maximize the reward amount and would be happy if Aizen was satisfied with the amount. Aizen was of course very pleased and stayed to wait for his reward and then asked Dominic what exactly he had told the guild since it had such an effect. Dominic told of how he had recounted all the events he had seen for himself immediately upon his return to the guild. Communicating with the Supreme Spirit, as well as instantly destroying the monsters, had made a lasting impression on everyone present in the guild. Aizen once again thought about his secrecy, because now he had become quite a well-known character in the guild, and all that remained was to collect the reward and think about the future journey. As far as the spiritual teacher remembered, the compensation for this task was supposed to be 15,000 gold for 3 people, and now it was interesting to see how much this amount would increase. Aizen immediately mentally calculated that 10,000 gold could be used to stay in an inn for 2 people for a month. Dominic also explained that he emphasized his story as much as possible, that Aizen had been able to do the work much more than the request, and therefore the reward amount should increase tenfold. The spiritual teacher didn't immediately believe Dominic's words, for if it was true, they should have received 150,000 gold. But even though it was a huge sum, Dominic thought it was not enough, and Ketty explained that working with a higher spirit was traditionally an expensive request that a city or country would ask for directly, so she was a little embarrassed to award such a small sum. Aizen asked the girl not to worry, because even such a huge sum would be a good reward for him and would fully compensate for the spent magical forces and time. Then the spiritual teacher asked Dominic if he would be satisfied with an equal division of the reward. But the experienced adventurer refused the additional reward and explained that he had done almost nothing to help during the mission. Aizen tried to argue with Dominic, but the guy reminded him how he had only led the squad to the right place, and therefore even the usual reward of 5,000 was too much for him, whereas Aizen did the bulk of the work and deservedly should get most of the reward. Dominique also explained that if Aizen refused his reward, he would just keep all the money for the guild. Aizen agreed to take the huge amount as a reward, for he would definitely need the money during his long journey. The spiritual teacher then asked for permission to treat Dominic to food and drink, because if he didn't, he would feel a bit awkward accepting such a reward. Dominic of course agreed to the offer, but on the condition that his young partner Rin would join them for lunch. The girl had nothing against it and agreed to celebrate the successful completion of the mission together with everyone else. Aizen offered Dominic to choose whatever he wanted and advised him not to be shy with his choice of food and drink. The next morning, Yuriko went to the branch of the Southern Magical University to submit a report from Guild President Mel. Mel thanked Yuriko for choosing to bring this important report and gladly accepted the documents she had prepared. Yuriko reminded that she is no longer a student and unfortunately she doesn't have the opportunity to just meet Mel except on occasions like this. But Mel explained that Yuriko could arrange a formal meeting anytime and there was no problem with that. But the girl explained that she doesn't want to bother the president and make him rearrange his schedule because of her, because she knows very well how busy Mel is with important matters and teaching the current students. So she would definitely take the opportunity to run such an errand and would be happy to meet again. Mel of course realized that Yuriko has deep ties with the guild and the Magic University, so this girl can provide excellent quarters for magic training. Mel then asked Yuriko why she was looking at her so funny. Yuriko explained that she was admiring Mel's shiny hair, which was incredibly beautiful as usual. Yuriko confessed that she had always dreamed of touching that beautiful hair back when she was an ordinary student. Mel thanked the girl for the compliment, but she still wouldn't let her touch her hair. Mel explained that for her, as an heiress of the blood of the Gemstone people, she could only allow other people to touch her hair on very special occasions. Yuriko asked if she understood correctly that the Gem people are a clan that has long been linked to spirits, and if she is not mistaken, because Mel's hair has magical power, she doesn't allow other people to touch it so easily. Mel confirmed the girl's assumption and explained that she can only allow people she recognizes to do so, because her hair has a blessing on it. Yuriko of course knew that the magic blessing was bestowed on her hair, and if people tried to touch it, they would simply fail. And if people tried to do it by force, they would be thrown back, and that's why hardly anyone touched Mel's hair. Mel praised her former student for such a vast knowledge, and then thought that really only those with great magical power could break through the power of blessing could touch her hair. Mel explained to Yuriko that if she wanted to touch her hair, she needed to constantly improve her alchemist skills, because even 100 heroes wouldn't be able to touch her hair that easily. Yuriko promised to work hard in the future and always listen to Mel's advice. While reviewing the report she received from the guild, Mel noticed the description of the simultaneous appearance of a miasma and a higher spirit. She was curious about such a rare incident and wanted more details. The request mentioned the appearance of an aggressive elder spirit and demonic monsters, but in the end no one was hurt, and that was surprising. Mel recognized that if the information had reached the Magic University a little faster, this violation would have been prevented. And so the cooperation between the city and the Magic University was still not perfect and needed to be improved. Yuriko still recalled how the system and tools that Mel had come up with along with hundreds of heroes were always useful, though of course it would take some time to fully adapt the process. But nevertheless, life is much easier and safer with the system, and everything Mel creates is always useful. Mel was thankful for this praise, because she is always trying to do things for people. Although Mel admitted that most of her discoveries were made in the past while learning from her teacher, Mel talked about how much she learned from her hero teacher, and that's why now that she became the president of a magical university, she also has to be a caring master for the other students. Yuriko confessed that she really wished she could meet the person who taught Mel, and was able to give her such vast knowledge and abilities. Mel replied that she too would like to meet him at least one more time, for it had been a long time since she had last seen him. But despite the pleasant memories, Mel decided to concentrate on her work and continued to study the documents. Mel was surprised to read about how an adventurer with a C rank had defeated demonic beasts, and was also able to banish a supreme spirit. Mel reread the information on the page several times, but she couldn't believe it, because a senior spirit can't be banished so easily. Only she or the head of security would be able to do that, since they have a higher rank than other people. Yuriko reported the latest rumors that her subordinates had told her about the horrible spirits and a wizard in the vicinity of the city. Mel decided that in that case this mysterious person probably had strong magical skills. Though rank is gained based on magical rather than physical strength, and is not affected by talents or abilities. Mel wanted to meet such a strong adventurer and thought about the possibility of going to the city soon. But then Mel noticed that this report was urgent, and apparently the number of demonic beasts was increasing because of the miasma. Yuriko explained that the hunger of the horned moles is indeed a huge problem, with the amount of alchemical materials drastically reduced. Mel agreed with her student and added that in addition to that, demonic beasts also eat the food of other monsters. That was why demonic beasts would start looking for food soon, and the risk of encountering them would increase day by day. Mel stated that the intelligent demonic beasts will target specifically people who can use magic, and she herself needs to be careful in this situation as her aura might attract attention. But in any case, the exchange of information between the city and the Magic University should be more efficient. Yuriko promised to look into the problem and offered to make sure that next time the information would be delivered on time. A few days later, Aizen and Rin were just walking around the city and sightseeing, and eventually an ordinary walk turned into a real adventure. The travelers unexpectedly encountered a huge monster in the form of a toad, which was a demonic beast. But thanks to the incredible abilities of the spiritual teacher, he dealt with the monster very easily, and once again enjoyed his victory. Then the travelers sold the magic stones in an alchemical company, and this day was really busy and eventually pleased with good earnings. The next morning, Aizen thought about continuing his journey, and explained to his companion that he had already seen all the places mentioned in the letter. Eventually, the spiritual teacher suggested that Rinna not waste any time and leave the city today. The girl agreed to this suggestion, even though she enjoyed living in this city, and then asked where they would go next. Aizen thought about the possibility of taking a route south, as there are many small towns on the way to the big cities, which means the roads should be good. The spiritual teacher then asked if Rin wanted to go to any particular place, but the girl answered as usual that she didn't care where to go with the teacher and was ready to go south. Ison decided to stop by the magical university on the way, and Rin decided that they would meet Mel after all. Ison confirmed his wish, though he wasn't sure about the meeting, because Mel must be very busy and might not have any free time. So perhaps it would be enough just to see from the outside how she was doing. Rin praised her teacher for worrying about other people, for that is a distinctive aspect of his character, and he is always attentive to other people's problems and concerns. Ison did not expect to hear such words and asked if Rin was joking in this case, but the girl proudly stated that she always tells people the best things about her teacher. Ison laughed in response and admitted that it would be great to get along with everyone in town. Eventually, Ison suggested that they go to greet Yuriko, since they had decided to leave the town. They still needed to prepare for it. Rin agreed and was already dreaming of meeting Mel. A few minutes later, the travelers found themselves at the front desk of the Alchemy Garden and asked a guy in a white uniform for help. The store employee explained that he had been told to make a contract with Mr. Ison, and so he didn't need to wait long. The spiritual teacher suggested the girl not to waste time and take the opportunity to drink some fragrant tea. A few minutes later, the store manager and secretary in one person Stanley came to the table and greeted the guests. Ison remembered the man, whom he had seen only once and then briefly in Yuriko's company. Stanley reminded him that he was the president's secretary, and the president was currently on her way to a magical university, so she wouldn't be back until tomorrow. Ison thanked him for the information, since it would be possible not to wait for Yuriko. But Stanley explained that he was allowed to come to the Magic University if he had some important business to attend to, so he could accompany Ison and Rin, if they didn't mind of course. This was great news for the travelers, because they wanted to visit the Magical University themselves. Stanley was pleased with the guests' agreement and promised to get them to the place as soon as possible. Stanley offered to walk to the carriage and promised to reach the Magical University in less than an hour. Ison thanked the caring secretary for his help and appreciated his foresight. But Stanley explained that he was always ready to help people whom President Yuriko appreciated. Meanwhile, at the Magical University, the girls from the student council visited Mel and reported the completion of preparations for the evening course and boasted about the perfect tuning of the magic speaker. Mel praised the students for their good news and admitted that she hadn't expected such a quick result from them. One of the students explained that it had been quite some time since President Mel, and the hundreds of heroes had given her own lecture, and so there were already over 30 people gathered in the auditorium waiting for her to appear. Yuriko pointed out that President Mel was still as popular with the students as when she herself was a student. Mel replied that she herself was very happy to see the sheer number of motivated children who reminded her of past students. One of the servants then reported a ready report from the watchtower, ready to be provided by the captain of the university guard. The captain of the guard reported that they have noticed strange fluctuations in the magical power on the plane in the southern part, but still they are unable to discern the details from the observation magic tool. Mel decided to take a look at the situation herself and headed to the south-facing window while the captain hurried to join his guards. Mel looked out the window and remembered the magical barrier that surrounded the entire university. Despite the guard captain's warning, Mel didn't notice any abnormalities, so she decided to check the problem herself. The president of the magical university used a magic detection spell and tried to detect the hidden threat. A swift magical beam rushed forward, surveying the area around the magic university, and then after a few minutes began to circle around one spot. Mel explained that if there was any hidden magic nearby, they should be able to spot it easily from the window thanks to this spell. Yuriko marveled at her teacher's abilities and watched with interest. Yuriko admitted that she had never seen a magic detector with such a range, because it was supposed to suck a lot of magic energy. But she couldn't see any fatigue on Mel's face, which meant that her magical energy reserve was enormous. Mel talked about how during the war with the evil god such actions were one of her tasks, so now she can use such an energy-consuming spell without much effort. Yuriko decided that this was all different from the other hero's ability and really impressive. But Mel continued to observe the results of her magic, but did not detect any suspicious magical effects despite their presence, and it was a little disappointing, because she had hoped to surprise her student. Despite the first setback, the president of the magical university continued to survey the area with the magic detector, for she trusted her guardsmen to notice the strange activity. Mel explained to Yuriko that her teacher had much better detection abilities, and it was from him that she had learned this ability. Yuriko was fascinated by the story and couldn't believe that there was a person who was stronger than Mel. Also, the president of the magical university talked about how her teacher is able to hear the voices of everything around him, and that makes him an incredibly strong person. Yuriko, he thought that the president's teacher was some kind of amazing spiritualist able to communicate with the earth and even plants. But Mel explained that even the most brilliant spiritualist can't communicate with earth spirits or plants he can't see, so eye contact is important. Yuriko asked if spiritualists are unable to see or talk to lower-class spirits in an open field on the outskirts of a pioneer town. Mel confirmed that usually it is indeed impossible. Besides, weak spirits are incapable of speaking any language. Therefore, even those of the 100 heroes who can speak the spirit language can't do something like this. But nevertheless, for a true prophet to become a professional at speaking with spirits is quite possible. Yuriko tried to realize all the flow of information about the unknown person and realized how unique he was. But after a few minutes, the calmness of the president of the magical university ended, because she noticed a strange movement of the detector, which detected an unknown magical aura. Suddenly, a huge image of a strange creature began to appear in the distance, and Yuriko decided that this is how a magical reaction occurs. But Mel didn't expect such an effect at all and stared at the horrible silhouette of the magical creature. After a few seconds, the creature fully materialized, and Mel was horrified to find that it was actually an ogre titan. Yuriko was shocked by the appearance of such a huge monster, for this creature belonged to the demonic class and had tremendous regeneration and physical abilities. Yuriko had absolutely no idea why this creature was near a magical university. But Mel meanwhile pondered the consequences of approaching such a huge monster, grasped magical powers and abilities to hide its appearance and deceive the observing guardsmen. But after taking a few steps towards the magical university, the ogre titan began to disappear from sight again, and Mel couldn't believe that this creature could be completely invisible. Yuriko cautiously suggested that it was all very much like the power of an evil god whose magic allowed monsters to hide their presence. Mel agreed and explained that it was a very nasty magic that couldn't be detected without a simultaneous combination of detection magic and exceptional perception. But Yuriko reminded her that demonic beasts shouldn't be able to use such powerful spells. Mel remembered that according to research, ogre titans are only capable of earth-type magic. But now this ogre was using invisibility, which is unnatural for such creatures. Most likely this ogre has somehow learned a new spell, and apparently miasma does not only increase the power of the demonic beast. Mel talked about how when monsters eat the flesh of an evil god, the miasmas inside eventually mix with their bodies and some of them eventually evolve, gaining the magic and abilities of the evil god. Yuriko realized that this huge creature had actually evolved a completely unknown kind of demonic monster. But suddenly the ogre titan cancelled its invisibility, and Mel tried to understand the reason for such actions. But the realization came instantly when the demonic creature began to activate an unknown attack spell. Mel immediately sensed the danger, but was confused and didn't know what to do. Meanwhile, the huge demonic monster activated the crystal cannon spell and attacked the magic university. Huge rocks crashed into the building, causing irreparable damage, and Mel and Yuriko were on the ground a moment later, miraculously avoiding a direct hit. Coughing up dust, Yuriko hurried to see if President Mel was alright. As it turned out, she was fine and only had a slightly bruised leg due to the fact that they had to fly down. Yuriko was also uninjured and felt a little pain in her arm. Mel was shocked by such an unexpected attack and the consequences that resulted in the destruction of the magical university. This once again confirmed the colossal power of the demonic monster. Fortunately, the most enormous piece of stone had fallen into the president's personal laboratory, where there were no outsiders. With that, Mel always had an energy that let her know when someone was in her lab. So the only people in there were herself and Yuriko, and it remained to be seen if the other rooms were affected. After a few minutes, the captain of the university guard came by and inquired about the president's condition, and Mel immediately asked for a situation report. Captain Elizabeth explained that she had already informed the guards of each sector, and was now able to find out about the destruction of 2 buildings. Mel was immediately excited when she heard about the destruction of the auditorium, because it was the most important trouble. The president of the magical university remembered that there should have been students in the auditorium, and immediately asked what was wrong with them. Elizabeth explained that thanks to the protective magic imposed on the building, no one was hurt by the explosion. But unfortunately, the students who couldn't escape were trapped under the rubble. But at the moment, the rescue magic was active, and so they would definitely not be crushed to death. This was good news considering the situation, and Mel mentally praised herself for her foresight. for in order to protect all the students she had cast a protection spell on all the buildings of the university. This spell becomes a shield in case of an emergency and absorbs the impact if a student is confronted with danger. And when children are trapped under rubble, the spell creates shelters to help them survive. This unique magical defense was built into the building with the help of architects and now helped in a difficult situation. Then the president of the magical university, watching the approach of the huge monster, decided to make her move, because otherwise this creature will destroy them all. Elizabeth, without expressing any emotion, immediately realized that they were confronted by not quite ordinary demonic creature. Mel told the captain that the ogre titan was able to use the magic of the evil god after absorbing the miasma, and was clearly hungry and was going to eat people. Elizabeth asked how they were going to act and confront this horrible monster, for she was ready to immediately pass orders to all the guards and staff of the university. In the captain's hands was a magical item for short-distance communication, and on the territory of the magical university one could freely use it to communicate. Mel ordered all the rank and file of the university to be responsible for the rescue and evacuation of the students, and the guardsmen to prepare to fight alongside her to divert the demonic monster's attention. After that, Mel ordered the information of the emergency to be transmitted to the city of Firsters by magical beacons or letters, in order to alert the powerful adventurers. The president of the magical university herself decided to maximize her time by fighting the giant titan. Mel decided not to risk her student Yuriko and asked her to rescue the students, as her abilities would be more useful there than during the battle with the monster. After all, Yuriko can perfectly use alchemical medicine depending on the situation. But Yuriko didn't want to leave President Mel and didn't dare to follow orders. At the same time, Yuriko reminded that it would take at least 10 A-rank adventurers to subdue a normal ogre titan, and this creature was much stronger due to absorbing miasma. Yuriko stated that the president wouldn't have enough men to contain the monster, and that's why she wanted to fight too. But Mel kept insisting that Yuriko should use her abilities to save the students. The president of the magical university wanted to prioritize the rescue operation and promised that she would be fine, because the demonic beast wouldn't be able to overpower them so easily. Meanwhile, Captain Elizabeth had finished relaying the information and was ready to enter the battle. In the end, Yuriko obeyed despite her desire to stay, and then promised to immediately return to the battlefield after evacuating the students. Mel thought at that moment that she really did wrong when she imitated her master and showed off to her student, and ended up missing the moment of attack. It was also worth remembering the Titan Ogre's ability to use strong regeneration, and it could only be destroyed when the core and the heart was hit and the regeneration process was disrupted. After a few minutes, Captain Elizabeth was joined by the guardsmen, and the entire security squad was ready to defend the grounds of the magical university. Mel reminded her subordinates that they needed to buy as much time as possible to give the students a chance to escape, and at this point it was enough for them to contain the monster. Meanwhile, the carriage creaked towards the magical university, and the travelers noticed a thick smoke in the distance, just where the magical university was located. Stanley's secretary decided it was smoke signal magic, though he doubted the color of the smoke was correct. Eisen asked Stanley what he thought was going on and if they were in any serious trouble. Stanley explained that the smoke was signal magic used in case of an emergency, especially the special color used when the university guards couldn't deal with a demonic beast. Suddenly the carriage stopped, and Stanley explained to the travelers that he would like to ask them to go immediately to the university, although of course it would be wiser to turn back to the city to ensure their safety. But nevertheless, he had heard about how Eisen and Rin had incredible powers and had already been able to prove their strength. Stanley stated that in this situation it would be a crime to waste time, and the best option would be to go to the university immediately to ensure the safety of the president of Yuriko's company, who was currently there. If that was possible for Eisen-san, of course. Stanley asked for his assistance in fixing the problem. Stanley admitted that he was willing to sacrifice his own life to save Mel and Yuriko's university president, but he doubted his abilities, and so he asked for assistance. Eisen appreciated this man's honesty, for Stanley could have just kept silent and delivered them to the magical university unnoticed, but he didn't and explained everything. Rin looked at her teacher and expressed her desire to help and try to save people, and she was also very interested in fighting a demonic monster. In the end, the spiritual teacher asked Stanley to lift his head and promised to help, for when a friend is in trouble he is always ready to help, even in spite of mortal danger. Stanley smiled for the first time during the whole journey and thanked Eisen for this noble decision. The elderly secretary decided not to waste any time and rushed towards the magical university, apologizing in advance for the fact that the carriage would be shaky on the way. The horse was rushing at top speed, pulling the weighty carriage with passengers behind it. Aizen watched the increasing smoke in the distance and decided that if they were late, it would be pointless, so it would be wise to go first thanks to magic powers. Aizen asked his faithful apprentice to get ready to jump and explained to the elderly Stanley that they would travel further on foot and leave their luggage on him. The astonished secretary had no idea what was going on and nearly fell off the wagon when he saw the passengers jumping out. The jump was so unexpected for Stanley that he even stopped looking at the road and did not immediately believe what was happening. But at the moment of the jump, the spiritual teacher asked for help from the gay air, which instantly picked up Aizen and Rin without letting them fall to the ground. The air current of immense force helped the travelers to outrun the carriage in a few seconds and carried them to the magical university. Aizen explained that thanks to the wind magic they would reach the place very quickly and could help in the fight against the demonic monster. Stanley was fascinated by the wind saddling ability of the spiritual teacher, for he had never seen anything like it before and tried to speed up. Rin stated that the emergency situation at the magical university was continuing, for new puffs of signal smoke were visible in the sky. Aizen realized this himself and increased his speed even more. Stanley continued to be impressed, for he could not believe that the rookie adventurers were faster than the crew, and displayed unique magical abilities. Meanwhile, Yuriko commanded the evacuation efforts and ordered the wounded to gather at the gates of the school. She then informed the staff that some people remained under the rubble. The student assembly hall area was in a deplorable state and was horribly destroyed. Staff were actively searching and removing the rubble, and gradually they managed to find some frightened students. One of the girls found a roster of students who were in the assembly hall and brought it to Yuriko. The girl quickly studied the roster and realized that there were 40 students in the auditorium when the building collapsed. At this point, 37 people had already been rescued, leaving 3 more undiscovered students under the rubble. Yuriko realized that President Mel was still fighting an unequal battle with the horrible demonic monster, and she wanted to complete the evacuation as quickly as possible so she could return to the battlefield and help her. Yuriko started calling out to the stranded students and asking for them to respond. But unfortunately no one answered her voice. The girl decided that perhaps the students had passed out or due to their injuries they couldn't scream. That being said, it was pointless to use magical detection to find the stranded students since there were so many staff people around and she simply wouldn't be able to distinguish people's auras. In the end, the dedicated Yuriko decided to try to remove the rubble herself, but unfortunately the girl's physical abilities didn't allow her to do it quickly. Yuriko felt despair at some point and decided that there was no heroic level mage capable of doing such a thing. At the same time, Yuriko realized that while there were 3 students lying under the rubble who couldn't get out, President Mel couldn't leave the battlefield either and was in mortal danger fighting an unequal opponent. It was obvious that the president of the magical university would not be able to hold back the demonic monster for long, and so Yuriko desperately began to remove the rubble with her bare hands. The girl tearfully recalled that she herself had graduated from this university and created the best company in the city, and all of this was made possible by Mel's training. The situation was literally saturated with tragedy, and Yuriko was losing hope with every second and sincerely hoped for some help. But at that moment, the girl heard a familiar voice behind her that seemed like something unreal. Aizen, smiling amiably, promised to help the girl and save the students. This event energized Yuriko, because now she had hope for a positive result. The girl asked in a trembling voice how it happened that Aizen was here and now. The spiritual teacher calmly explained that he had actually come here to meet a friend. But as it turned out, there were more urgent matters to fulfill. Yuriko tried to pull herself together and explain the situation about the Titan's ogre attack that was amplified by miasmas. But Aizen replied that he had already learned about everything going on around thanks to his magical perception, and suggested not to waste time. The girl was delighted, for she had not even imagined how one could simply listen to the environment to understand all the events that had happened. But Aizen was not going to explain her all the details of his abilities and promised to immediately save the students and then deal with the demonic monster.